Chosen one, stop everything you are doing right now, because God has been watching you in secret, and what he saw is about to change the entire direction of your life. Not tomorrow, not next week, right now, in this very moment, heaven is releasing something over your life that the enemy fought for years to keep hidden from you. There is something happening around you right now that your natural eyes cannot see. There is movement in the spiritual realm that began long before this moment. Long before this message found you. Long before you even knew you needed to hear what God has been holding in silence. And the reason he kept it hidden, the reason heaven waited until this exact second to pull back the curtain, is because what God has seen in you required the right moment to be revealed. Not any moment. This moment, the one you are standing in right now. You need to understand something deeply before we go any further. God does not watch the way the world watches. The world watches to judge. The world watches to compare. The world watches to find fault, to measure worth, to determine whether someone is enough. But God watches with purpose. God watches with precision. When the Father turned his eyes toward you, and he has never stopped watching, he was not counting your failures. He was not cataloging your mistakes. He was not recording every time you fell short, every prayer that felt like it hit the ceiling, every night you cried yourself into silence wondering if anyone in heaven could actually hear you. That is not what God saw. What God saw when he watched you in secret is something far more powerful than anything the enemy tried to convince you of. And today, chosen one, heaven has decided it is time to tell you exactly what the Father has been seeing. He saw your endurance. In every single season where the weight was so heavy that you did not know how you would take the next step, God was watching. He saw the moments when everyone around you had an opinion about what you should do, who you should be, how fast you should move, how loudly you should speak, and yet something inside you went quiet. Something inside you paused. You did not always understand why you could not just move the way other people moved. You did not always understand why the path that seemed so clear for everyone else felt like a fog you were walking through blindly. But God was watching that fog. He was watching you walk through it anyway. And what he saw in those moments was not confusion. What he saw was faith in motion. Real faith. The kind that does not need a sign to keep going. The kind that does not need applause to stay standing. The kind that wakes up in the morning and chooses to believe even when belief feels like the most illogical thing in the room. That is what God saw, and he called it beautiful. He saw your silence. There were conversations you chose not to have. There were rooms you chose to leave. There were people who pushed you, provoked you, misrepresented you, spread lies about your name, and stood in public spaces telling versions of your story that had nothing to do with the truth you lived. And you said nothing. Not because you had no words, not because you were weak, not because you did not know the truth. You said nothing because something deep inside your spirit told you that this battle was not yours to fight with your mouth. And chosen one, that silence was not weakness. That silence was warfare, the most powerful kind, the kind that heaven records, the kind that God steps into and says, "Let me handle what my child refused to stoop down to." Every time you held your tongue, when you had every right to speak, God was watching. Every time you walked out of a room that wanted to pull you into chaos, God was watching. And what he saw in that silence was the mark of someone who has learned to trust a power greater than their own voice. That is not small. That is the kind of maturity that changes entire seasons. He saw your loyalty. In a world that teaches people to look out for themselves first, to protect their own interests above everything else, to measure every relationship by what it produces and discard what no longer serves them, you remained loyal. To people who did not always deserve it. To promises that cost you more than you expected. To a God who sometimes felt distant in the very seasons you needed him closest. You stayed. You did not abandon the people he placed in your life the moment things became inconvenient. You did not walk away from your faith the moment the miracle did not come on the schedule you had written in your heart. You stayed. You prayed anyway. You believed anyway. You showed up anyway. And God watched every single moment of that loyalty with the eyes of a father who sees his own reflection in the child that refuses to quit. What he saw in your loyalty was a person who mirrors his own nature. Because God is loyal. God does not abandon. God does not give up. And He has been watching you carry that same nature in a world that told you it was foolish to do so. He saw your grief. This is the part that many people never speak out loud, but chosen one, God saw it all. He saw the losses that changed you permanently. He saw the relationships that ended and left a silence in your life that you still feel in certain moments even now. He saw the dreams you buried quietly because circumstances made them feel impossible. He saw the version of yourself that you had to let go of in order to survive certain seasons. The lighter version, the more hopeful version, the version that had not yet been touched by the kind of pain that leaves a permanent mark. God watched you grieve all of that, and He did not look away. He did not grow impatient with your sorrow. He did not tell you to move faster or feel less or simply get over it. He sat with every tear. He recorded every silent moment of grief that you carried alone because you did not want to burden anyone else with the weight of what you were holding. And what God saw in your grief was not weakness. He saw depth. He saw a heart that loved deeply enough to hurt deeply. He saw a soul that was being expanded by the very pain it was trying to survive. Because grief does something to a chosen one that comfort never can. It creates capacity. It opens rooms inside the spirit that nothing else can open. And God was watching every room being opened inside of you. He saw your questions. There were nights, and you remember some of them even now, where the questions were louder than anything else. Where you looked at your life and wondered if God had somehow misplaced your file. Where you watched people around you move into blessings that felt like they belonged to you. Step into doors that you had been standing outside of for what felt like years. Receive favor that you had been quietly believing for. And you wondered in the silence of your own spirit whether God had simply forgotten your name. You asked the hard questions. Why me? Why this? Why now? Why still? And God did not punish you for those questions. He did not pull back from you because you dared to cry out into the silence and demand an answer. He watched you ask with the eyes of a father who knows that the child asking is the same child who will one day look back at this season and understand every single answer that felt absent in the moment. Your questions were never faithlessness. They were intimacy. Only someone in a real relationship with God asks God those kinds of questions. And God saw that. He called it honest. He called it brave. He saw what the enemy tried to destroy in you. This is something that heaven needs you to receive fully right now. The attacks you have experienced, and chosen one, you know exactly what attacks I'm speaking of were not random. The enemy does not waste his energy on people who do not carry significant spiritual weight. He does not assign his most strategic assignments against ordinary targets. When you look back at the pattern of warfare in your life, at the timing of certain losses and disruptions and betrayals and setbacks, you will begin to see something that the enemy hoped you would never notice. The attacks were always aimed at the same thing: your identity, your sense of worth, your confidence in the calling God placed inside of you before you were born. Every single weapon the enemy deployed against your life had one target: the truth of who God made you to be. Because if the enemy could convince you that you were ordinary, he would neutralize the extraordinary assignment that heaven carved your name into before time began. But chosen one, here's what God saw as he watched every single one of those attacks unfold. He saw them fail. Not partially fail, completely fail, because you are still here. The thing the enemy aimed at most, your belief, your identity, your calling, your spirit, is still alive, still breathing, still standing. And God watched that. And what he saw was a warrior who survived every ambush and did not even fully realize the magnitude of what they had just walked through. He saw your private worship, the moments that no camera captured, the moments that no one in your life witnessed, the times you put on a song and let the presence of God settle over you in a room where no one else was watching, the prayers you prayed it to in the morning when the rest of the world was asleep, the moments you sat in stillness and simply said, God, I do not understand this, but I trust you. Not because you felt it fully, not because the circumstances backed up what you were declaring, but because something deeper than logic compelled you to place your trust in a God who had never actually left your side. Those private moments were not invisible. They were the most visible thing in the spiritual realm. They were the moments that moved heaven. They were the moments that shifted things in your life that you have not yet seen the full evidence of yet. God watched every single one of those private moments with more attention than any public performance could ever receive. And what he saw in your private worship was the heart of someone who has chosen him not for what he provides, but for who he is. That kind of love changes everything. He saw your next chapter before you could. This is where, chosen one, everything begins to shift. Because everything God has been watching, every moment of endurance, every act of loyalty, every tear of grief, every night of private worship, every second of silence when you could have spoken, every question you asked into the darkness was not just being observed. It was being used. God does not watch passively. When God watches, he is building. He is constructing something with the raw materials of your lived experience that you do not have the vantage point to see from where you are standing. But heaven has the full picture. And what God sees when he looks at everything you have walked through is not a life defined by what it suffered. He sees a life being shaped into something that will carry a weight of glory that your current circumstances cannot contain. The trials were not the story. They were the preparation for the story. The losses were not the final chapter. They were the construction of the foundation on which the final chapter will be built. And God has been watching every brick being laid with the patience of someone who already knows what the finished building is going to look like. He saw your consistency in the invisible. There is a particular kind of faithfulness that the world will never celebrate because the world cannot see it. It happens in the moments between the moments. It happens in the ordinary Tuesday afternoons when nothing dramatic is occurring, when no test is being passed and no breakthrough is on the visible horizon, when life simply requires you to show up again and do the right thing again and choose God again for no reason other than that you decided a long time ago that he was worth choosing. God saw all of those moments. Every single unremarkable, uncelebrated, unwitnessed moment where you simply kept going, where you woke up and chose integrity even when compromise was right there offering you something easier, where you served someone who would never thank you, where you gave and your own account felt empty, where you prayed over someone else's breakthrough while your own was still nowhere on the horizon. The world measures greatness by the mountaintop moments. God measures greatness by the valley floor moments. And in all those valley floor moments where no one was watching and nothing was happening, and yet you remained faithful, God was there. He saw every single one, and he called it the foundation. Because, chosen one, you cannot build what God is about to build on a foundation of performance. You can only build it on a foundation of private faithfulness. And you have been laying that foundation brick by brick in seasons you thought were wasted. They were not wasted. They were the most productive seasons of your entire spiritual life. What God saw in you, chosen one, is someone who is worth every second of his watching. Someone whose name he carved into the plans of heaven, not out of obligation, but out of love. Someone whose journey, as painful and as long and as confusing as it has felt from the inside, has been a masterpiece in the making from the outside. God does not create ordinary stories. He writes epics, and yours is still being written. Every chapter you thought was a dead end was actually a turning point dressed in the language of loss. Every person who walked out of your life created space for the divine connections that are already on their way to you. Every door that closed with force was protecting you from a room that would have held you back from the room you were actually built for. You cannot see it then, but God could, and he watched every single redirection with the calm certainty of someone who knows exactly where the road is going even when the traveler cannot see past the next bend. The secret things God has been watching are now becoming the public things God is about to move. The hidden preparation is now moving toward visible promotion. The private faithfulness is now becoming the foundation for public favor. Everything that was done in the secret place is being carried into the open. And chosen one, the shift is not coming. The shift has already begun. You're not waiting for God to start. God has already started. You're simply catching up to what heaven put in motion long before this message found you. Chosen one, if your spirit is burning right now, if something inside you feels seen for the first time in a long time, that is not coincidence. That is confirmation. God did not bring you to this message by accident. He brought you here because the secret season is ending and the seen season is beginning. Everything He watched you carry in silence is about to be honored openly. Everything you believe for in the dark is about to be revealed in the light. You're not behind. You're not forgotten. You're not too late. You are exactly where heaven needed you to be in order to receive what God has been holding for you. Stay the course, chosen one. The best part of your story is not behind you. It has not even been written yet. If this message reached something deep inside your spirit today, take a moment right now and type the words "I am seen" in the comments below. Not as a ritual, as a declaration, as a sign to heaven that you received what God sent through this message. If someone came to your mind while you were listening, someone who has been carrying a heavy season alone, share this with them right now. One message can change the direction of someone's entire year. And if you want heaven to keep speaking to you through this channel, subscribe and turn on your notifications so that the next word God releases finds you the moment it arrives. You were brought here on purpose. Stay connected, chosen one. God is not finished speaking.